Welcome to the first non-intro episode of the Recovery Chronicles. Today we're going to talk about harm reduction. Let me go ahead and slap a definition of that on the screen. All right, you can see it right here. I'm not going to be one of those YouTube hosts who read stuff out loud for you. I definitely have faith in your ability to read this. As you can see, the approach is about prevention of harm as opposed to prevention of drug use itself. It's seeming to indicate that we cannot eradicate drug use, which would seem to be correct. Remember this guy, El Chapo? We chased him for years. We brought him to trial. I believe he's currently actually in FedMax in Colorado. And yet, once he was in custody and being tried, people were still using drugs. We got the biggest fish and other fish emerged. The demand didn't go away. So maybe we can't eradicate and we do need to focus elsewhere. Now, these types of charts are notoriously inconsistent with monetary values, but we've seemingly spent trillions on the war on drugs and overdose rates are going up. So maybe it's time for a new strategy, right? But there's a problem. When people think of harm reduction, they think of stuff like free needles, needle exchanges, safe needles, etc., which causes some people to think, wait, taxpayer money is going to let people get high? This, of course, gets us into culture and ideology war territory around this idea of harm reduction. Look at this tweet. Now, this is a little insane at some level for sure, but if people want to do this where they have grandkids and it's not affecting your airspace and they're going to do it anyway, shouldn't we consider it? Now consider this. This is what some might call the more rational approach to this, and the framing on this issue is consistently about one side thinking they found a magic key around addiction and overdose, and the other side thinking it's the end of civilization as we know it. Twitter is a decidedly very liberal place, and you can take a lot of stuff there with a grain of salt. But if you look at this, it seems like the places getting attacked for harm reduction are the same places where overdose rates seem to be pretty low. Now, you might be wondering why I'm doing a video on harm reduction, which is typically associated with intravenous drug use in terms of addiction, when my specific problem was alcohol, and specifically double IPAs typically. It's because I'm interested in addiction overall, and how we can find solutions to it, which seems to be lacking as we stigmatize a lot of the behavior. Actually, the day that Biden was declared the winner over Trump in 2020 was the same day I turned 40. I went out with some of my wife's friends and their husbands, mostly pretty conservative guys, and we talked a lot about the Oregon decriminalization law. That was called Measure 110, and you can see what it does here. It's been around for close to 3 years now and had some measure of success, although Oregonians want to give it some more time. What it seems like we've learned here is that harm reduction could be a powerful strategy, but it becomes enmeshed in culture wars and our preconceived stigmas about addiction and whether or not addicts do it to themselves. Now, personally, I don't think addicts do it to themselves, but that's a topic for another video. You guys remember Amsterdam and The Wire? It was an open-air drug market where the police turned a blind eye. Now, NIMBY is a very powerful concept in society. If you're unfamiliar with NIMBY, it stands for Not in My Backyard. And I honestly think a lot of people would not mind ideas like corralled off drug zones or harm reduction programs on face, as long as it's not impacting them or their property values or their business. They get so worked up about this stuff because it becomes part of the cultural brawls that we all seem to revel and engage in. For years now, we've deified the entrepreneur, the innovator, the dreamer. Harm reduction is just a way to innovate what's been an almost completely failed approach to addiction for 4 decades or more. It's not perfect, but it could work, and the results seem promising in some areas. So that's kind of a 35,000 foot look at harm reduction and addiction and kind of how it gets caught up in the culture wars. If you have any ideas about solutions to addiction or, kind of what we're doing with harm reduction that's good and bad, feel free to leave it in the comments. It's a pretty nascent channel, so I don't expect comments to be huge yet by any means, but, throw me a bone on that. We will be back next week with a new video about addiction and accountability.